Hello, everyone. It's Lionel Sander from Pembroke Publishers, and thanks for joining us this afternoon or this evening, wherever you are in this country. Just before we get started and I introduce our presenter for today, I would just like to take a moment and pause and acknowledge that we are all on our own journey of reconciliation and finding our path through this very important issue. And so I would like you to know that Pembroke Publishers' head office is situated upon traditional territories of the Wendat, the Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Mississaugas of Scugog, Hiwa First Nation, Alderfield First Nation, and the Métis Nation. And the treaty covering this area of land in Toronto, Ontario, is collectively known as the Williams Treaties of 1923. I personally like to recognize the significant contributions of Indigenous peoples across this land. We seek a new relationship with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, one based in honor and deep respect. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter for today, the fabulous, and I can say that because I've sat through more than one of your presentations, Adrienne Gear. She is a teacher, an author, and a presenter, both in workshops and, of course, today in webinars. She has more than 25 years of elementary classroom experience and is passionate about literacy, learning, and especially children's literature. And again, I know that for a fact. She's an author of 8 professional books, all around the reading, writing, and thinking power series, which is something that she is built of, and I would say is a world-class force in terms of influencing elementary teachers everywhere. In terms of bringing reading and writing and now thinking into their classrooms. She produces practical lessons and recommended book lists that are widely used everywhere across North America, as well as the United States, China, UK, and Sweden. She lives in British Columbia in the beautiful Okanagan with her husband and 2 sons. So, Adrienne, it's great to have you here, and I'll pass the virtual mic over to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Lionel. I always feel so rest and assured when I'm working with you because you set everything up so beautifully for me and I don't have to worry about anything except what I'm going to say. So thank you for that. And thank you to everyone for joining. It's so exciting to see that we've got pretty much across the country educators coming to listen this afternoon or this evening, wherever your time zone is. So I do appreciate that. And I'm so excited to be talking about this book, which hasn't even been out really for a month yet. And it's really exciting to be able to do that. I also wanted to begin with the land acknowledgement, and I am grateful and have utmost respect for the land that I'm joining you from today, which is under the unceded territory of the Silks Okanagan peoples. And I am grateful to live and work and learn and play in this very, very precious land, on this land. So Lionel's done the intro. I'm a teacher, presenter, author, and that says 7 books, but I have just added 1 to the list, and I love children's literature. So those are my books, the first 8, and then my newer one that I'm talking about today just released, and Lionel's going to talk about how to purchase this, and that there's a coupon that he will share with you at the end of the presentation. Just a couple of things about just my resources. I have a website, and on that website, there's lots of things for you to be able to look through. I have on-demand webinars, and as Lionel says, all my book lists are there, and I've got little resource bundles, and I blog about picture books pretty much once a week. I put out a blog called the Top 10 Tuesdays, where I'm picking themes and recommending books. So please visit my website and have a look at those things. So we're going to get started right away. I have very, very little time and lots of slides, as I always have. So I'm going to go really quickly and try to get through as many as I can. I want to start really kind of grounding us all in kind of the foundation of this new book. by just taking a few minutes to talk about reading. And reading is, of course, it's always being discussed, but in the last few years, there has been a big surge, of course. And I think all elementary educators, particularly early primary and primary, are talking and focusing on a lot of the science of reading and foundational phonics. And so I want to kind of put that in a bigger picture. So when we talk about reading proficiency, when we talk about a child that is proficient, when we talk about our goal as reading teachers, we want our students to be proficient readers. What does that really mean? Well, very simply, it means that you as a reader have acquired and mastered two skill sets. One is the code. And the big emphasis from science of reading and all of the last few years, we're really focusing on that because there's been a big slide in managing children's ability to actually decode words. So book reading is my language for that. The other part of reading is the comprehension, understanding what the words mean. I refer to that as brain reading. And one of the things that I talk about in my book is how important it is that we are very transparent with our students about these two skill sets. And that when we're talking to our students about learning to read and becoming a better reader, a good reader, a strong reader, we're very clear with what that looks like. And when we're doing our small group instruction and our phonics lessons, we say we are focusing right now on our book reading skills. Then sometimes we can focus on our brain reading skills. And often when I'm teaching, I will say, today I'm going to do the book reading for you so you can practice your brain reading. And so that we have that language, and that this idea that thinking about text, thinking about what the story is about, is just as important. It's kind of at that sort of equal, just as important as the code. So, if we're looking at what we can do in a classroom, I set up what I call the class reading goals early in the beginning of the school year and really reference that language. In this class, we are learning to be book readers. And this is how we are practicing book reading, the letters and sounds and decoding and chunks and patterns and the fluency. But we're also not but and we're also brain readers. We understand those words and we're learning and practicing that. This is how we're doing it. And then by paying attention to our thinking and connecting, and so that's kind of that really, really important setting up. Because I think what happens sometimes in classrooms, when we're focusing all on our UFly program or our Heggerty or our science of reading and our phonics, we get so not fixated, but like we narrow it down to just those important skills. But sometimes I feel like maybe our students are losing sight of like the big picture. This is one part of becoming a reader. It's not the whole thing. It's one part. Now, I know you're thinking, why does she keep talking about reading when she's supposed to be talking about thinking? But I am going to get there. This is how I always begin, is that sort of like, how do we get there? Now, I was just going to show you, this was a grade 4 teacher in a school in Kelowna, and I had done, some work around the book reading and brain reading. And so she got her class and they created this kind of collaborative anchor chart about, we are decoders and we are thinkers. And then just bringing kids into that language, I think, is really, really important. So we've got the skills, we've got the code, and we've got the comprehension. And as I mentioned, code has been at the forefront of many, many, many districts. And we are working through really trying to support our students in those very important, essential foundational skills that will enable them to be able to read the words on the page with fluency with proficiency. And so we've got the U-Fly program, I know a lot in Ontario, and pockets across the country, and Haggerty was also big, and there's all sorts of different things. I just want to say, no one, including me, I think, is even arguing that this is important. It is important. It's essential. But one thing that I am talking about is that it's one piece of a solid holistic reading program. And we can't forget the other pieces. And the other piece, of course, is the thinking, the brain reading, which will lead into what I then call the powerful thinking. So David Pearson says, you knew there was going to be a but. Yes, this is important, but speaking as the comprehension queen, you probably knew no matter how important code is, it's important, it's essential. It's not the point of reading. So we have to be mindful of the holistic package, right? It's two skill sets, and we can't forget one over the other. I love this quote by Regie Rootman. A phonics first approach to reading is too narrow. From the start, we must view learning to read as a language and thinking process, not just a sound out words process. So we move now to the comprehension. Well, comprehension is something that I feel that I had a little bit of experience with, because if we look at the date on that first publication of Reading Power, it's almost 20 years old. It's hard for me to believe that it's 20 years old and still being used. And I think that that has a tribute to the fact that comprehension strategies, they never go away, right? We're always trying to focus on that holistic approach. So for those of you who know, research is the foundation of any classroom practice that is solidified and being used. And of course, the science of reading is grounded in research. So is the comprehension. Really, the sort of the founding father, I look at David Pearson as the person who really kind of brought this out into the forefront, is the thinking strategies used by proficient readers. His research in the late 80s, early 90s came up with this really very well used now and well known list of strategies that strong readers naturally use when they're reading to help them with their brain reading. They're making connections, they're questioning text, they're visualizing, inferring, analyzing, and monitoring their understanding. And so those strategies really were at the basis of me creating what I called Reading Power. Reading Power is my catchphrase for comprehension instruction, really, comprehension strategies. Excuse me, but I just thought the Reading Power sounded a little bit more, kind of catchy for students. But many of you know Reading Power. Many of you have used it and are familiar now with these strategies. And so for years, this has been how I talk to teachers about supporting comprehension, supporting brain reading. We had the little poster, many of you have seen this, with the pieces that fit in your brain. Excuse me, those are the Reading Power strategies. And the posters making thinking visible. This is a really important part of when you talk to students about thinking. We want to make sure that we're teaching that visual, right? Like, what does it look like to be a thinker? A thinker, when they're reading a book, is making connections, asking questions, etc. Then we need a language to associate those strategies. So what does thinking sound like? And, those are very important charts to have up in your classroom, that everyone's using the same language to talk about comprehension, similar to a common language that we may have in math. And the importance of modeling. We do read aloud, think aloud. So the teacher is modeling. This is when you say, I'm going to do some book reading, but then I'm going to pause and I'm going to tell you what my brain is thinking about. So lots of opportunities for different ways to model your thinking. And a really important piece of this kind of reading power equation is the implementation of that interactive conversation with partners. So tell your partner what you're thinking about. Tell your partner a connection. Tell your partner a visual image that you have. And then, of course, reading power was very grounded when I first developed it because of my passion for picture books. Very, very grounded in the idea that we're connecting the different strategies with what we would define as an anchor book for connecting or an anchor book for visualizing, because of the writing that supports and kind of invites the reader to do particular strategies, which just makes it more helpful when you're doing the instruction and the teaching. So different connect books and visualizing books. So reading power has been around for a while, and it's been utilized in many, many classrooms across the country. But what happened really, that was the seed that started this new book. It happened a few years ago. Up until that point, reading power was limited to our literacy blocks. And we were using the strategies and the picture books, but it was all kind of under that umbrella of reading instruction. I was visiting a school. It was not my school. It was a school that had been very well grounded in reading power strategy. So students were very familiar with the language, and most of the teachers had been to workshops, etc. And I was visiting the school, and I was walking down the hall. I was meeting someone, and I walked down the hall, and I noticed a classroom with the lights out. The door was open, and I was listening and curious, because the students were all sitting in the desks, and I peered around the corner, and at the front of the room was a picture, this painting on the screen that the teacher was projecting. And while the students were looking at this painting, Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh, the teacher had this like very soft and quiet kind of voice, and I was so curious what she was saying about the painting. And then I kind of paused, and I poked my head in, and I listened to her. And while I was listening, I was noticing that she wasn't just kind of describing or talking. She was really posing thinking questions to the students. So, what are you wondering about this painting? What connection do you have to this picture? What does it remind you of? What are you wondering about the artist? Have you ever been to a small little town before? What have you ever been outside with, the stars that are shining? And I was absolutely mesmerized. This is not a painting that was new to me. I know Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night, I've seen it. But what was incredible to me was how much of reading power she was using in an art lesson. And I'm thinking to myself, how is this happening? Like, she's doing reading power, but this is art. There's no books in anyone's hand. No one's even reading. But that truly was the seed that grew into this new book, because from that moment on, I recognized that, yes, of course we read, we think when we read, of course, yes, and we've been teaching that, we've been focusing on that in our literacy blocks. But because of that moment in that art room, I all of a sudden thought, well, of course we think when we read, but we think when we look at art. We think when we listen to music, we think in science, we think in socials, we think in math. Thinking, those strategies that I had been referring to as reading power strategies, are actually thinking power strategies. And that was really kind of the beginning of what has grown into this book. Now, sorry, I'm just going to go back to this and explain before I flip the slide. I was really set on writing this, but I needed some way of kind of grounding. And as I mentioned before, the research is so important when we're looking at changing practice or sort of amplifying certain parts of our instructional practice, it really stems out of research. So for me, I am not a researcher. I read research, but I'm more of a practitioner. But really, my research into research needed to be more current. So I spent a considerable amount of time looking at current research around comprehension. I wasn't looking at science of reading necessarily, not that I don't agree with that or anything, but my focus was what's new around comprehension. What's on the sort of the current foreground. And so I read a lot. And there were three things that I kept seeing coming up, coming up, coming up. There was lots, but I'm focusing on these three specifically because of that tie into, comprehension across the curriculum. So these were the three that I found fascinating. I made connections to them, but I saw real promise in using this research to kind of be at the forefront, or sort of the foundation of powerful understanding. So sorry, of powerful thinking. I was thinking of a different book. So these are the three: constrained and unconstrained reading skills, language comprehension, and knowledge building. Knowledge building in particular is, I don't know if you've heard, it's brewing. It's sort of this one thing that you just keep, it's kind of it's coming, it's the buzz in a way. And some of you have heard, I'm sure, have heard of it. So I want to talk about those three and then put it into practice, because that's really what I did with the book. So this is Scott Paris was the originator, I think, of this kind of phrasing, and his research it was started in 2005, but then he's worked with other people, and this is a Balanced Literacy K-6 is a book that he wrote in 2020. But I focused on this because I loved the language, and it was really, really it's important. So he's talking again about the two skill sets that readers need: code and comprehension, but he refers to them as constrained and unconstrained skills. I was fascinated with that language. I love language, and I just loved how he said, code. Code is mastery based. Once we learn the letters and the sounds, we know them. The letters and the alphabets are absolutely of the utmost importance when children are learning to read. They act as that bridge over into meaning. But the problem is that we focus so much of our time on this, but there is an end. To some degree, there's an end. When you know that the letter M says we don't need to keep on learning that. Comprehension, on the other hand, is what he refers to as unconstrained skills. We continue learning how to develop meaning and understanding long into our adulthood. The comprehension doesn't stop when you reach level 30. You don't just stop learning how to understand things. The vocabulary and the background knowledge connected to comprehension, so closely connected to comprehension, I'm going to talk about that shortly, it's ongoing. And so when we think about our instruction in our classrooms, in our schools, in our grade levels, comprehension is unconstrained. It never stops. As an adult reader, any adult reader who's reading a complex text gets stuck on a word. I get stuck on words all the time. There's words I don't know. I'm not looking at that word and going, what sound does the letter B make? I have no idea. Like I know that, but I don't necessarily know what the word means. So what am I doing? I'm looking at context clues. I'm making connections. If there's any visual images, I'm looking at those. Like, I'm using my meaning making skills as an adult. So we can't, this is the whole point, we can't limit our instruction on constrained skills. Okay, next research. Language comprehension. Okay, so I understand reading comprehension. Reading comprehension is the ability to derive meaning from print. Language comprehension is the ability to derive meaning from spoken words. So Dr. Matthew Davies, he's the sort of the main voice here. Language comprehension is a key aspect of reading comprehension that is currently being overlooked in many classrooms. So this is what he says. Even the best phonics-based skill program will not transform a child into a strong reader if the child has limited knowledge of the language, impoverished vocabulary, and little knowledge of key subjects. Language. I love language. Words. Words count. They matter. And you can have a child practicing inferring and kind of looking at a picture, but it's the context behind the strategy that's just as important as the strategy. In fact, more. So this is another thing that I kept kind of coming back to and kept thinking about it. This is important too, because we're all teaching in different, parts of the country and different communities. Students from disadvantaged backgrounds may struggle with reading comprehension despite being able to decode accurately and read fluently. They're often believed to have poor reading comprehension ability, when in fact it is their lack of language comprehension. And this is important because it's going to flow into the next research. Less overall knowledge and vocabulary, which is the root cause. Okay, next one. So this is third big research that I'm sort of putting into practice: knowledge building. Building knowledge. Now let's look at this for a minute. Background knowledge versus building knowledge. Background knowledge is knowledge the child comes to our classrooms with. A reference is funds of knowledge. It is the knowledge the child brings with them that came from their home, their family, their interaction outside of the school. Knowledge building knowledge, is the knowledge that a child builds in class. Knowledge is not literal facts. It is information plus thinking. That's knowledge. That comes from us. So how does this play a role in what I'm talking about? I've had so many conversations with teachers about reading power being a struggle for them because the kids have no background knowledge. I can't teach connecting. The kids have no background knowledge. It doesn't work. They don't have the knowledge. But that's not on them. Like, it's not their fault. They bring what they were given. And some children are given an enormous amount of background knowledge. Some kids have none, or limited, so limited. So why can't that be our call to action rather than a complaint? Why can't that be, hey, I've got a new purpose. I'm going to help my students build knowledge. Now, knowledge is everywhere. They can access knowledge on the internet in 2 seconds, in less than 2 seconds. But it's so much. And some of it, like, to me, this is our calling. I had a conversation with Lionel. I've been thinking about it so much. Yesterday, we were doing a little sound check, and we were talking about how curriculum that came out, especially in BC, in the last 10 years, our latest curriculum redesign was all about inquiry-based learning and problem solving and having kids work in groups and inquiry and everything like that. But what's happening is kids are learning those strategies, but without the content. Like, it felt like that curriculum was like, okay, content doesn't matter anymore. We need to teach kids how to be deep thinkers and knowledge, not knowledge builders, because we weren't talking about that, but inquiry and problem solving and that. But it's like without that knowledge, it's hard to do that. It's like learning how to cook but not having any of the ingredients, right? Like you can't really do it very well. So this is where it really kind of feels exciting to me, because I feel like we have a new role. We're going to build knowledge with our kids. That's what we're going to do. We're going to help them with their language comprehension. We're going to help them with their unconstrained reading skills. I love this. I'm giving you the articles for all of these, but this one was a big one for me. Among the most important factors critical for literacy development is knowledge. Knowledge is necessary to comprehend what we read. Foundational skills are literally meaningless unless readers can make sense of the words and text. This is the big part. This sense making requires knowledge that must be systematically built, not just activated, through instructional experiences and curricula that evoke curiosity and the desire to learn more. In short, knowledge matters. That quote, I want to make my pajamas out of it, and just like, because that is really the key starting kind of excitement. That when I read that, I thought, yes, I've got to write this book. I've got to help teachers recognize that this is our new calling. It really truly is. So, and this is important. Don't delay, build knowledge today. That was my own little thing, because I'm corny like that. But building knowledge need not and should not wait until students possess some level of foundational reading skills. No, we build knowledge from the first day of school in kindergarten, because we're reading higher sophisticated text to them, not because we think that they can't read it and we have to read it for them. We're doing it because we want them to be exposed to knowledge, the wonders of the world. And that is kind of where this is a really exciting thing for me, because it's doable. It's totally doable. So in summary, here we go. Language comprehension, unconstrained reading skills, knowledge building, mush them all together. And that is what my new book is about. And when I was playing around with some of the visuals for this one came up, and I thought, well, it's a martini glass, and we with 3 olives, and we are toasting our new calling, which is knowledge building and teaching kids how to think around curriculum. So I'm kind of excited about that. So I'm going to pause, because I get so excited, and then I start sweating, and I want to pause for a minute to just catch my breath. I would love in the chat for you to say, and I can't even see the chat right now, what's something that I've said that really kind of spoke to you, that made sense, or you kind of went, yes, or you kind of thought, oh, that's interesting. Just anything that you're thinking about right now. And maybe, Lionel, if you can maybe help me, because I'm worried if I go out of this that I might not.
Okay, I'll watch it and come back
If
to it.
there's a couple of comments, we don't have to read them all, but.
Sure.
And then I'm going to check my time, because you know me. Okay, we're good. We're close to
good.
halfway. I'm just going to go back to this. That's the better visual.
They're starting to come in now. The first couple are around prior knowledge coming from the family and home, was from Jen. Deirdre was talking about shifting thinking from about the lack of background knowledge to an opportunity to build it, which I thought was great too. Melissa's talking about reading skills are everywhere. Helene is building knowledge with language needed in ESL as a comment.
Yes.
Veronica is talking about the diversity of levels of knowledge we get in the classroom is vast, as is their reading levels.
Mm-hmm.
So that range of learners that we have there. So that's kind of a little bit of a flavor of what's coming in.
Excellent. So everyone's grabbed different things, but still thinking about, this whole new reset. So this is what I love. This is where I feel like all of my books are kind of like this. It's like research is there, but what does it look like in the classroom? That's always what people say. Okay, I get all that, but what does it look like? And so that's what I always try to do in my books, and I've tried to do in Powerful Thinking. So I refer to this as a teaching reset. So when we think about reading power or comprehension, those lessons have up to now really primarily been used in literacy blocks. And we often use fiction books when we're doing those lessons. So here are my kind of reset questions. Why would we limit brain reading instruction just to literacy? What if we brought more content-rich texts into our content lessons? What if we used those texts as tools and merged brain reading into content units? So those were kind of the questions that I pose. What if we just did a little shift? I get so many teachers saying to me, and like really saying, I have no time. My literacy blocks are so full of phonics. And they are, and yes, that's a lot of lessons need to be taught in that block. Does that mean you there's no room for comprehension skills? No, it means we just need to do the reset and maybe put it into different areas. So this is what it looks like when I took that idea of the research. I've sort of set it up into actionable things. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to do all of these tomorrow, but these are just ideas of ways that we can start to help students develop language comprehension, build knowledge, and work on that sort of unconstrained skills. So these are 5. I'm going to take you through them. I'll show you examples. Nonfiction text as tools, content-rich read-alouds, conversations, literacy-rich curriculum, and of course, teaching. So nonfiction text as tools. This is big. And it's really, really important that we start to kind of do this reset. Because when I ask you to think about your classroom right now, if I walked into your classroom and looked at the books you have in there for your students, most teachers, when I ask this question, would agree that the majority of the books that they have in their classroom, especially if you're early primary, tend to be more on the fiction side. Then if I ask you this question, think about your daily read alouds. How often are we reading fiction to our students? How often are we reading nonfiction? Now, we hope to be at an equal balance, but most elementary teachers, because I've asked hundreds of them, they all kind of most, and it's very grade dependent, and it's also personal preference, but the majority of people would say, yeah, I think I'm heavily weighted to fiction. Ask me this question 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I was like 80-20 for fiction. I hardly had any nonfiction in my class at all. So this is where I say, bring it on. We need to add more nonfiction books into our classroom library. We need the content books to build the knowledge. And so I'm going to really quickly, I'm going to quickly go through many of these books and series. Fly Guy, great for grade 2, 3, maybe 4. Perfect series, great for reading aloud. The Fly Guy is, the imaginative narrator, and he, focuses on a topic, and he's funny, and kids really love his humor, but we're learning as we're reading. Who Would Win series, I often use this for compare and contrast writing as my anchor books, but kids love these books. Compare 2 animals that are similar and rank them, give them points. Like the reader is invited to say who would win with like brain size and teeth, the number of teeth, and kids love these books. 2 Truths and a Lie, my favorite book, if you're a beginning teacher or a TOC and you need a book in your bag that you always have, this is the book. You read 3 paragraphs on one topic, like sharks. So here are 3 paragraphs about sharks. 3 facts. 2 are true and 1 is a lie. And I read it, and then I get the kids to talk about it with a partner. Which one do you think? Why do you think? It's so engaging. Then I send them off for recess. And then they don't find out till they come back in the classroom. I love these books. So good. Truth and a Lie, Sharks, First Step into Reading is good for primary. Elise Gravel, French Canadian and from Quebec, and I love all her books. But the Disgusting Creature series is fantastic and so humorous. Again, with these, this is great for persuasive writing. We learn so much about disgusting creature from the voice of the disgusting creature, who doesn't think they're disgusting in the least. So really great learning, but also great for read alouds. Scott Ritchie, he's from Vancouver Island, and I feel like Scott Ritchie goes into our curriculum and looks up topics that we're teaching, because it always seems like he narrows his topics to things that we use. So these are great for grade 3, 4, is kind of social studies and science. That's his most recent one. It's all on family heritage. Fantastic. The Mothers of Song series, really good in BC, because it's the Indigenous animals that they follow. Jeanette Winter is someone I really admire. She uses books that she uses topics of sort of people, particularly women, who've had a big impact on the world. So I love reading these. Jane Goodall and Malala and Greta Thunberg. I love her books. And if you're looking for really good biographies for younger readers, Little People, Big Dreams, fantastic for primary. I love Kate Messner, Over and Under the Snow, Over and Under the Pond, Over and Under the Rainforest. She's got about 12 books in this series. Split Screen, love the illustrations. I love that series. I'm Trying to Love. I always, if I'm teaching a unit on like sort of recycling or math or insects, like I always like to start with one of these books, because the narrator is always like, I'm trying to love this, but I don't know if I like it. And then all the voices come in with all the reasons why you should love it. Canadian biographies, nonfiction, scholastic, love biographies. We need to learn about the people in Canada that have made a difference. Author studies were very popular in my early years of teaching, but it's interesting how many author studies tended to focus on fiction authors like Eric Carle. There's lots of author studies on Eric Carle, Jez Alborough. Another one was Jan Brett we used to do. But why would we not? Oh, and the Fan Brothers. I love the Fan Brothers. They're Canadian, and their books are really good author studies for maybe a little bit older students, grade 4 and 5. Why would we not do an author study on an information author, on a nonfiction author? Steve Jenkins, one of my very, very favorite. What a great experience to learn about him and learn about the kind of books that he writes. Melissa Stewart is another one. I love her writing. These books are brilliant. Whalefall is, I talk about Whalefall in my introduction. It is such a powerful book on ocean and ecosystems, and it's amazing. Nicola Davies is another one I love. I'm sure lots of you will know these people. April Polisser, again, I use her books for writing. She's a beautiful writer, but also really good for nonfiction. Okay, number 2. Sorry, I went through that a lot. Now we have all these books in our classroom. What do we do with them? We read aloud. Every day we are reading information books. I'm doing the book reading so you can focus on your brain reading. Content rich, interactive read alouds. So you've got these great books, and now you're doing a read aloud. Kate DiCamillo, here's her quote: "Reading aloud makes readers. Reading aloud makes writers. Reading aloud changes lives." Yes, it does. and it's going to change the lives of students now because we are helping build knowledge. Young students can engage in more complex ideas and vocabulary than what they can read by themselves at this point, building the knowledge they need to engage in more sophisticated text in the future. We are giving them language. We are giving them knowledge when we do that read aloud. And somebody asked me, what do you mean by interactive read aloud? Like, I don't know what that means. It's very simple. You are interacting with the book. So you're reading and you're thinking, and then you're saying, this reminds me, and you're interacting with the book. You're also interacting with the students. Students are interacting with you. Students are interacting with the book, and students are interacting with each other. That is what happens in an interactive read aloud. There's a lot of interaction going on, but it's purposeful and it's engaged and it's focused. I love this. One content-rich read aloud. What are the benefits? Look at the benefits. Knowledge building, brain reading, oral language, vocabulary development, listening comprehension, language comprehension, and student engagement and interest. Why would you not want to be benefiting your students with all of this, with one read aloud of content-rich read aloud? It's so easy to do and so important. Then you want to have kids engaged in focused conversations. So this is a strategy I introduce in the book, but it's a great one to use for your kids. Because, in class conversations, there's always like 6 kids always put their hands up and they kind of take on the conversation. And then there's other kids that don't ever. So this works really well. It's called 3-2-1 talk, or 1-2-3 talk. Think for 1, talk for 2, share for 3. Think for 1 minute by yourself. Think about this for a minute, but it's usually 20 seconds. Talk to a partner for 2 minutes. Tell your partner what you're thinking, and then let's share out for 3. It's such a quick strategy that always gets all the kids talking. It's important that they're talking about their thinking. Literacy-rich curricula. So this is where we're doing our reset. We're bringing these really important information books connected to our curricula and our socials and science topics. Now, this was something I read that I just found fascinating because I totally made connections to it. I have to check my time. Okay, the dinosaur effect. How many of you have ever had a child in your class who is absolutely a walking encyclopedia about a certain topic? Like, they call it the dinosaur effect because in kindergarten, grade 1 and 2, there's often a lot of children who have this absolutely astounding amount of information about dinosaurs. But some kids are different. Some kids are airplanes. Some kids, and I talk about this in my book. I had a boy in my class, this is probably 10 years ago, and he is grade 3. He knew every player on the Boston Bruins from the day that team started to the current day. He knew every player, every number, their hockey scores, their stats. It was unbelievable. It was just like he'd spew all this information out. It was crazy. But this is just talking about those children and what that actual dinosaur effect, if we analyze that, what we can find. So I'm just going to read this. The dinosaur effects refers to the capacity of young children to capitalize on their passionate interests and retain astounding stores of knowledge. Not only that, but large multisyllabic vocabulary they encountered to their topics seem to stick the instant they're exposed to them. With their huge bank of background knowledge, these children are motivated to use their emerging decoding skills and immerse themselves in high-level texts about their passion. But, this is important, put that same child in a guided reading group, give them an isolated, decodable, or level text on a random topic for which interest and background knowledge is non-existent, the child demonstrates anything but proficiency in reading. Oh, Oh my goodness. Okay, what does that tell us? What? So you read this, and I'm like, okay, what am I taking from this? Two things. When students are engaged in topics they're interested in, they're far more motivated to read, write, speak, and learn. This is the big one. Exposure to text sets. The impact that exposure to multiple related texts students read or have read to them has on deepening their engagement, knowledge, vocabulary, and comprehension. Text sets. This is Stephanie Strachan. When curriculum concepts are shared and discussed over time through multiple interactive read alouds on the same topic, they become internalized for children as they make the knowledge their, oh my gosh, that's spelled wrong, the knowledge their own and integrate it within their existing framework. They make the knowledge their own and integrate it into their existing framework. And what's happening? Their existing framework is growing. It's growing because we're coming to the call of knowledge building. That's what we're doing. So literacy rich curricula, what does that mean? Here's what you do. You gather sets of content-rich books connected to your units of study. And when I say a text set, it's 3 or more. Use them often for interactive read-alouds. Invite not in your literacy blocks, it can be, but in your other curriculum blocks, invite students to talk about their thinking, model your thinking before, during, and after, and then have a knowledge building table maybe with the text sets on. It's not that hard, but it's intentional, it's purposeful, it's important. So here's some examples of some content rich text sets. Seeds, there you go, 4 books. Simple Machines, Rocks and Minerals. I love Rocks and Minerals now. I never used to like it, but I love it now. I love the wide range. You can look at rocks from an artist lens, from a collector's lens, from an indigenous lens, from a scientist lens. Simple motion, human body, water cycle. And you can't teach water cycle ever again without talking about access to clean water. It goes hand in hand. So please don't forget to talk about that if you're doing water cycle. Water and land, skyscrapers, structures, and buildings, right? I love explorers. That was my favorite social studies topic in grade 4. But now my little reset is you can't really teach explorers anymore without talking about first contact. And that's a very important link to integrate in. Okay, so now I'm pausing and pondering. What was it that stuck for you from that list of things that I just shared? The content-rich text, engaging students in more content-rich read alouds, modeling knowledge building, encouraging kids to talk about their thinking. I'm not going to have you go into the chat now, but what was something that really stuck with you that you think, yeah, I could do that? Maybe it's bringing more nonfiction. Maybe it's doing more nonfiction read alouds. Okay, so now what? Now what do we do? Here's my drum roll. My drum roll is now we have to teach. And so in the book, so I talk about all that at the beginning of the book. And then the second part of the book is, okay, now we've got all these books, we're doing the interactive read alouds and everything, but we also need to take that really important, sort of role as we need to teach, we need to be explicit when we're teaching lessons that help to build knowledge and nudge thinking. And so in the book, so this is like the 5th thing on my list is the teaching. So in the book, I have created what I call a thinking lesson roadmap. So it's basically sharing some practical lessons, some of the lessons you might have seen before in other books. But remember, this is a reset. It's like taking things that we've sort of known from other places and really focusing on the thinking part. So this is set out for you. All the lessons, as with all my books, are very kind of scripted and easy to follow. And then you can just, I was going to share one with you, the Fact React. So basically, it's so simple. Fact React, you take a really great book like this one, you read a page. So in one lifetime, a male seahorse will carry and birth 1,000 teeny weeny squiggly wiggly baby seahorses. So that's the fact. That's what the book says. But what are you thinking? What's your reaction? And so then I model, wow, a male seahorse had babies? A male seahorse? Do any other male animals have babies? And then so I'm modeling kind of my reaction. And so this is a great book. It's super simple. So with Fact React, I look for books that have big wow facts, but not a ton of text. So these are really good ones about animals. That's a one I did with students about insects. This was grade 2. And then Steve Jenkins is another really popular book for the Fact React, where they write the fact and then they do the reaction. So it's a simple framework, but it really gets kids engaged and gets them thinking about the fact, alone itself. Okay, and then the last part really quick, I'm not going to do, but I just want to explain the very end of the book. What I try to do is take the thinking and give you some practical things that you can do in your different curriculum areas. So for example, this was that seed I told you about. So I designed this lesson called Ta-da! Thinking Deeply About Art. So you show the students a painting and do exactly what that teacher was doing, talking them through it, and then sharing, having the kids sort of, this is what the drawing was, and then this is my connection or my question. The kids are so funny. My connection is to my mom likes sunflowers too. My question is, why did Vincent cut off his ear? Which really has nothing to do with it, but he, that was a part of the conversation. And then, you do music, you listen to a piece of music, and then you have the kids close their eyes and visualize and thinking of visualizing in gym time, math. One of the girls from Mathematizing 24/7, Kendra Jacobs from School District 23, she helped me write these lessons in the chapter. And she uses the new, which is a strategy for math. So I'm going to scroll through these really quickly. The new is, I already knew this, and this is something I knew. Thinking power in science. We talk about, what does a science do? And we learn the scientific method through going on a wonder walk. All these lessons are at sort of the end of the book, where the kids go out and they become scientists, and they're really looking closely at something in nature, and they're observing, and then they're wondering, and then they're hypothesizing. So I'm helping them learn the scientific method in actual, like, real forms. That's called the Wonder Web. Thinking in across Canada. So I use picture books to teach the history of Canada. A book for every province. So this unit is in there. And then the last chapter, and then I'm done. The last chapter, I just want to point out 2 teachers from School District 23 Kelowna, and they are grade 1 teachers, and they did a building Indigenous knowledge in an early classroom. It is the most incredible unit that brings in literature and thinking in every single corner, looking for ways to authentically and respectfully indigenize their practice in grade 1 curriculum across all subjects all year. We did not want to continue with the one and done approach. So we turned to books. So I went to their classroom. They had all their Indigenous books, and they were planning this extensive year-long practice, and they used it everywhere in math. They used it in art. It's just a beautiful, and the whole unit is in there with all of those connections. So I just wanted to point that out. I'm going to end because I know my time is up, but here is, it's a quote from my own book. That, my friends, is powerful thinking. One extraordinary picture book that captures a student's attention, invites curiosity, builds knowledge, and stretches thinking. And one teacher committed less to marks than to meaning making. And that teacher is you. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Lionel. I know I did get through my slides, but I think I went over time a little bit. If there's any questions or comments that came through, but I just, again, thank you so much for joining me and for listening to me as I like rattled through all those slides. And I hope it gave you a really good sense of the book. So Lionel, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Adrienne. I'm going to flip it back to, and we'll get to that in a second, but I just like to have that comment up I'll just quickly mention your book and do the promotion. That's always, it's always hard to do because you wrote the book. It's an amazing book. So I get to say that. It's easier for me to say it, but you'll see down below your camera there's sort of emojis, and the heart one is like gone crazy. And there's several times during the presentation where the heart just flew away as folks pressed it. So that's really cool. The comments in the chat are all lots of thank you, and thank you for clarifying things. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I would like to share an offer with folks just before everyone goes. One question that did stick in there that maybe you might want to tie into your wrap up, and I'll give you the last word here in a second, is does this work across all elementary grades? Because I think a lot of the examples were more in the primary. But just before you answer to that, I know many of you here saying, lots to ponder, love the ideas, thank you. If you haven't got the book yet, I'm just going to share an offer from Pembroke Publishers here, and it just takes me a second to set this up, and I'll just send that. It should be coming on your screen right now. Little offer that if you click on that button, it will take you to Pembroke Publishers homepage, and Adrienne's book is right on the front there, the Powerful Thinking book. If you decide to order that, if you use the code PTB24, that will get you $5 off on your order. So it's just a little thank you for joining us today. It's been great to have you here. And Adrienne, as we go out, as I said, I'd like to leave you with the last word, but just to be on behalf of everyone that's joined us today, thank you so much. It's taking, like you said earlier, it's taking that research and finding practical ways that you can see they would work in your classroom. That is your superpower. And even though the power is in the title, the superpower is in the words, using my decoding and thinking, those top two words in the top left-hand corner that make the difference. So thank you very much for everything today, and I'll pass it over to you to close us out.
Okay, thanks. I just want to address someone who just asking, it seems more ingrained in primary. And so again, I'm just going to point out knowledge building and making meaning and unconstrained skills go all the way into adulthood. So we can't limit. In fact, to me, it's just we're just at the cusp when they get to the point where they are able to read. But we should be reading out loud to our kids, even up to in high school. We should be helping them build knowledge. Knowledge is built not in a grade. Knowledge is grounded in learning and thinking, and we don't just learn and think in primary. So to me, this is like it's across every grade. It's a mindset and a call to action that as a teacher we are providing the knowledge that kids need to be able to then practice problem solving and practice knowledge inquiry-based learning. Like Lionel, you and I were talking about this the other day. Like they've got all those skills, but they're lacking sometimes the language and the knowledge and the vocabulary and the information. So to me, I see this as really like almost across all grade levels. Maybe my book samples are primary or elementary because I that's my area of interest and passion. That's my expertise of elementary. But I see this, I personally see this as being a really important thing in middle school and high school. So
Great.
that was a long answer to a
No, it was great.
question.
Okay, thank you.
But anyways, I just wanted to say that because people say that to me all the time. Oh, isn't reading power primary? No, we think in all, like we're, we want to promote thinking all the time. So it's not grounded in a grade level. I don't think
Great.
that's real.
Well, maybe we'll end and say goodnight to everyone here with Margot's comment that says read alouds and engagement for all. So
Exactly.
and
I would love
interactive.
you to I love when someone reads aloud to me. I listen to audiobooks or reading to me all the time. So
Exactly. Great.
okay, thank you so much for coming, and get a book, and hopefully we'll connect again another time. Thanks again, Lionel, very
Good.
much.
Thank you, Adrienne. Thanks, everyone. Have a good
Thanks.
evening.
Have
Take
a
care.
good evening.